feel like I need to write that.
Okay, thank y'all for coming today to this little mock workshop online. I'm going to be talking about intellectual freedom in the school library today. Can y'all hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to play the role of the school librarian today, and y'all, of course, are parents and teachers. So I'd appreciate as much participation and discussion that I can get from you today so that we all have a good learning experience.
Okay.
Okay. Hold on, I'm trying to get my slideshow to go. There it goes. Okay, so we have a very busy, about 40 minutes ahead of us. Our goals for this workshop include to understand student rights as protected by the Library Bill of Rights in the First Amendment, to understand the district's policies and procedures regarding intellectual freedom and the librarian's right to protect the library from censorship. And we're also going to review the impacts that book banning and censorship have on the learning community. So what I want you to do first of all is to turn to your handout on the first page. There's a table in the upper left-hand corner, and we're going to pre-assess your personal knowledge on these topics. So we're going to assess ourselves on the scale of 0 to 5. 0 means you don't know anything about any of these objectives that I've just said to you. 5 means you could teach this presentation yourself. So this grade is for you and you only, so be honest with your answers and go ahead and put those numbers down, please.
Okay.
I'm going to get the kitty out of my room real quick. Sorry. Okay, you ready to go on? Any questions about that? And we'll get back to that at the end of the presentation. Okay, so we're learning about intellectual freedom today. So let's talk about what intellectual freedom actually is. Intellectual freedom is the rights of library users to read and seek information without restriction. And now this is guaranteed by our First Amendment. It's a core value of the library and a basic right for our democracy. So the reason intellectual freedom is so important to our democracy is to create informed voters. So the process of creating those informed voters obviously starts with children. So the students in our school are testing or are preparing to become voters in the future by being offered this intellectual freedom. This freedom includes the user's right to multiple points of view. Excuse me. The American Library Association defines intellectual freedom as the rights that users of libraries in both public and schools have to seek and receive information from all points of view. Intellectual freedom isn't only found in our libraries, though. So I want you to think about what intellectual freedom means as in reading and seeking information without restriction. And I want you to think about your classrooms and your homes and tell me how you encourage your child or student to pursue intellectual freedom. So how does your classroom promote intellectual freedom?
Well, can I talk, Becky? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. One thing in our classroom that we do is we always try to have diverse genres and selections from different cultures represented for the children to read about, not just their culture. For example, we're going to read next week, we're going to read a book about Hanukkah and compare and contrast that with Christmas.
Awesome. So you're getting the multiple points of view in there. I love it. Good example. Thank you. Anybody else have anything they want to add?
Taking them to, different places where they can learn about other people's cultures and volunteering in different areas of different cultures.
Okay, good. Yeah. So really respecting the world perspective that is helping to pursue intellectual freedom. Okay, we're going to move on. So this is a Library Bill of Rights, and don't panic, I know this is a lot of text. The Library Bill of Rights are based on intellectual freedom and, vice versa. Intellectual freedom is based on Library Bill of Rights. They were developed by the American Library Association, and they are applied to both public and school libraries. So this is what me as a librarian and our library as a place, this is what we stand by. So we're going to look at these together. And if you can look on your handout, I have included all 5 of the Bill of Rights. And so I'm going to give you just a couple of minutes to read those to yourself, because I think that you can absorb that information the best in that way. So let's read that for a little bit to ourselves, and then we'll come back and we're going to discuss each of these rights together. So feel free to take down some notes, whatever you think would be helpful to understand each of these rights. Do you have any questions about that?
No.
Okay, I'm going to put some working music on for y'all. Y'all go ahead and work on that.
Crohn's disease.
Oh, not Crohn's.
You're more than just a bathroom disease.
You're a life of unpredictable symptoms.
That's hilarious.
Only YouTube. Okay, was that enough time for everybody? Are y'all ready to review these rights?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so these rights are granted to all library users. And to better understand how the library would apply each of these rights, I'm going to read a couple of scenarios, and I'll read them 2 times so you can get a good idea of it. And then I would like someone, I think you can chat in on here, like type in the chat. I haven't seen the chat bar pop up yet, but you can chat in an answer or speak in an answer of which right you think that the scenario I'm describing to you falls under. So hopefully that'll make more sense after our first one.
Okay.
So the first scenario is a local agency contacts the school library because they are concerned about a book containing offensive dialogue that is being made available to the students. The librarian assembles a committee to meet with and discuss the agency's concerns in hopes of resolving the conflict. I'll read that one more time to you. It's kind of long. A local agency contacts the school library because they are concerned about a book containing offensive dialogue that is being made available to the students. The librarian assembles a committee to meet with and discuss the agency's concerns in hopes of resolving the conflict. Does anybody know what Bill of Rights that scenario could fall under?
Number 4.
Let's see. One PowerPoint. Sorry, guys. Okay, good job. Yes, it is the 4th right. So in the scenario, the librarian was assembling a committee to meet with and discuss the agency's concerns. So they weren't disregarding the agency's concerns in any way, and they weren't just removing the book either. Libraries have librarians have the right to cooperate with persons and groups that are concerned with restricting free expression. And okay, yes, and so they should cooperate with all persons and groups. I'm sorry, my part of the words is blurred out there, so that's kind of hard to see. All right, scenario number 2. Parents would like the children's series Little Bill removed because of recent sexual allegations against the author Bill Cosby. I'll read it one more time. Parents would like the children's series Little Bill removed from the library because of recent sexual allegations against the author Bill Cosby. Anyone know what library right that falls under? Anybody new?
Maybe 2.
Number 2.
I hear a number 2. Anybody else?
Number 1.
Okay, I hear a number 1 and a number 2. Does anyone want to discuss why they think number 1 or number 2?
Well, specifically regarding the history of Bill Cosby, so it's the origin contributing.
Okay, good. So the parents wanted the book removed because of the creator's background, and material should not be excluded for that sole reason. So you are correct. Scenario number 2 is the right number 1. And then if my PowerPoint will always ever speed up. Okay, we'll move on. There it goes. Scenario number 3. A local church group confronts the librarian about removing a novel being used in class where the main character questions the existence of a higher power. I'll read it one more time. A local church group confronts the librarian about removing a novel being used in a classroom where the main character questions the existence of a higher power. Does anybody know what bill that is? A local church group confronts the librarian about removing a novel being used in class where the main character questions the existence of a higher power. So we have to think of the reason they're wanting the novel removed and the group that's disapproving of the novel. Materials should not be prescribed or removed because of partisan or doctrinal disapproval. So the reason that the church group does not agree with the teachings of the novel is not reason enough to censor the material. So that is right number 2. Does anyone have a question about that? What that means?
No, I thought it was that one. I just was afraid to say it.
It's okay, I'm sorry.
It would apply if it was a school.
What was that?
How would these Bill of Rights apply if this was a private school library?
I would say if the librarian was trained in an undergraduate school and they would follow this library Bill of Rights no matter what kind of school the librarian is in. Does that make sense? That's a good question. I never thought about that before. Does anyone have any background in that? Anyone know that answer?
I don't.
I don't either. That's a good question, though. So we didn't talk about the third Bill of Rights very much, which says libraries should challenge censorship in the fulfillment of their responsibility to provide information and enlightenment. All that means is that if the church group says they want the book removed, that the library shouldn't immediately remove that book, that they should challenge the censorship and defend their collection inside their school library. And the fifth right says a person's right to use a library should not be denied or abridged because of their origin, age, background, or views. which, working in the school, that one seems kind of obvious that we're not going to restrict anyone from coming to the library because of their origin. But I underlined the word age there because we need to be sure that we aren't restricting students to a certain age range of their books. If we have a kindergarten, we shouldn't have a kindergarten only section in our library. Students should be welcome to peruse the library as they see fit, and their reading teachers and librarians will teach them how to select appropriate materials for themselves. Does anyone have a question about that fifth right or that third right?
No?
No. I had a comment about that fifth one, though.
Yeah, please share.
Well, two, actually. One, I'm sorry my voice is so awful.
It's okay. I'm sorry. Making you talk.
When a child can't pay, they're fine. If there's a fee system set up, to me that is a way that they're denied their privilege to check out books, and also they lose their books. And then I've had children go a whole year with not being allowed to check out a book. And so I just let them have books out of my classroom. But
exactly.
To me, those are some policies that I've seen in a public school setting that concern me. And
exactly.
then,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say the other one was about the age. I've had gifted children that could read. For example, I have a second grader that can read on a sixth grade level. And so really she needs to have access to the middle school library to really have the books on her level. And of course her parents take her over there. But I think that we could work something out where that could happen at school. So anyway, those are just two comments.
That's cool. That's very helpful. And yes, the students' socioeconomic level, them being restricted from using the library because they can't afford the fines. They're right. That's right. Number 5, that's their background, their origin. That's their home life. It shouldn't have an impact on their their access to information and books. So thank you for that.
So usually the teacher just ends up paying the fines.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so we touched on censorship a little bit back there with third right, but let's talk about what censorship is exactly. So we are all entitled to our opinions about books and even controversial material within books, but when someone attempts to ban or restrict another person's use of that item in part or in full, that opinion turns into censorship. So there's a difference between criticism and censorship. A censor prejudges materials and makes a decision based on their point of view for an entire group of people. So a censorship is really asserting power over another person's ability to gain information or ideas. And that kind of sounds harsh, that they're gaining power over a person, when we think that in most instances a censor is really just concerned over an individual, and they want to protect a child or maybe even help restore some sort of moral value that the censor believes is lost. But under the First Amendment, each of us has the right to read, view, and listen to ideas, even if another person finds them offensive. So some people might say, well, some stuff is really offensive, so censorship is okay with that stuff, right? Well, when we think about censorship in our school library especially, I want y'all to understand that our collection is developed based on professional recommendation, literary merit, student interest level, lots and lots of professional reviews, and even a lot of our books reflect the classroom curriculum. So even though we are supporters and proponents of intellectual freedom, that freedom doesn't make it okay for us to put 50 Shades of Grey on the elementary school library shelves. So whenever you think about offensive material, within the school library, we have to ask ourselves, is the material really obscene, or does it just conflict with my point of view? Because actually the Supreme Court has ruled obscene material censorable, and this is not a community-based standard of obscenity. This is a different standard of obscenity. And the material is censorable if it lacks serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. And that makes me think of taking my young children to an art museum. They might see statues or pictures that are nude, but those materials have true artistic value, so there is no need to censor that, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So as a parent, we do have the right to censor our children and protect our children. I'm a parent of a very innocent child, and I understand that some movies, shows, and books are not appropriate for her. So if my family deems something inappropriate for my child, I have the right to prevent her from consuming that material. But I do not have the right from preventing anyone else's child from consuming that material. So in this example, if Eleanor's school librarian, if I said Eleanor couldn't check out a book, the librarian could not interfere with my decision, but they are not responsible for enforcing them either. So the librarian is not responsible for taking the parental role. Right. Anyone have any questions about that?
No, that makes good sense.
Okay. Okay, I included this on the second page of your handout. It's a really cool illustration infographic that someone designed from the key findings of the School Library Journal's controversial book survey. So they do this survey every year. They survey admin, teachers, parents about censorship in the school library. And there's a lot of data here and put in an easy to understand way. So I just wanted to give you all a second to consume that information, write some notes down, and if you feel led to discuss something afterwards, I'll have a time for that. But I'm going to give you a couple minutes to read this infographic. Do y'all need any more time to look at some of that?
No, that's good. Thank you.
All right. Okay, so I thought this would, it has a lot of eye-opening statistics on it, and it shows us really what issues our libraries are facing in defending intellectual freedom. There's some things on here that were a little bit surprising to me. Does anyone want to share something that was surprising to them that they read that they weren't expecting, that number or that content? I think to me, it was surprising that not only 59% of schools have a book selection policy to support their collection decisions, which I think that's the first step in defending your library, is saying, well, these books are, like you can see these words right here, reviews required for them, they're district mandated, they're personally adopted. Only 59% of schools right now have those policies. And I wonder if that number will grow in the next few years as censorship comes very common. Anyone else be surprised by anything?
Well, I was surprised that only 22%, the smallest number of challenges were in a small town.
Yeah.
But then I figured, well, I guess it's because their policies probably reflect the values of.
I thought so too. I thought a small town would be a place that would have a lot of challenges, but I bet the strength of the communities helps that collection development too. Anyone
Yes,
else?
I know here
Oh, go ahead.
that it's that. I was just going to say, I know it's that way here.
Yeah.
They won't put Captain Underpants in, which is a Dave Pilkey book, and it's hilarious. They won't put it in our library because it has underwear.
Oh, yeah, that's actually on one of the most often challenged book series is Captain Underpants Surprise.
I know.
And
it's really,
what that is called is self-censorship by the librarian. Up here you'll see that that's very common. More than 9 in 10 elementary and middle school librarians have not bought a book due to potentially controversial topics. So they see the word underpants and they think, well, maybe not that one.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think it answers Dalton's question here. It says 59% of private schools have formal guidelines.
Ah, thank you, Mrs. Trent. Yes. Right there. And that's a pretty good chunk. And this is interesting here, that it's not even very common in certain parts of the U.S. I wonder if just like they don't get very many challenges. That just makes me have more questions. Okay, we'll move on. Okay, so we have our handout again. On the first page, back to the first page, there's a second table at the top. And we're going to write down some ideas that we have about why we think books are censored. So what do you think are common reasons for censorship? What types of information and ideas are censors attempting to protect readers from? Or you might think that there's some value in censoring. So what do you think would make a book worth censoring? Like what would be an offensive material to you? So I wanted us to write down as many ideas as you can get on those boxes there. And then in contrast, what do you think makes a book look good? So the table underneath, if you can write qualities that you believe are common in a good book. That should just take us a few seconds. So what do we want our students to gain from reading? That would be a good way to think of that. Okay, would anyone like to share one of the reasons you think books get censored? What do you think is an offensive material within a book that would cause it to be censored?
I'm thinking
language.
Sorry. No, you go ahead. You go first.
I was just going to say like offensive language, or if it was, degrading to a certain group.
Okay, good. Okay, language or degrading to a certain group. Anybody else?
I was going to say books with an agenda. I mean, you can tell that it's pushing.
Like a political agenda, maybe?
Yes.
Okay. Anybody else?
Anything that teaches violence or self-harm.
Okay, violence or teaches violence. Okay, those are all pretty good. So let's look. I compiled all this information on this slide from the American Library Association, from their frequently banned books lists. So let's look at this. Sexuality and homosexuality are one of the main reasons. Language, we mentioned, vulgarity, religious reasons, racism, violence, and extreme radical or political views. So we were pretty on track with what people consider censorable. So I gathered a lot of titles from the American Library Association's page, and these lists of challenged or banned books go back decades and decades and decades. There's a lot of information. And the same reasons for censorship obviously pop up every year, and a lot of the same books pop up every year, especially at the high school level, and especially in the past several decades recently. So we're going to look at some of those lists, because we look at these words right here, and I think I'm not sure if I want my student or child to be consuming this type of information right here in front of us. But then we look at what kind of books are challenged or banned because of these reasons. And we see The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck. We see The Scarlet Letter for Language of Mice and Men. For religious reasons, Frankenstein has been banned. The Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter. Harry Potter is a very frequently challenged book recently. Racism, the books To Kill a Mockingbird and Gone with the Wind. Violence is the most surprising to me. This one popped up a couple of times. The Call of the Wild by Jack London and Where the Wild Things Are by Maurice Sendak. And then radical or political views, The Jungle, Catcher in the Rye, and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. So I'm not really a very strong read person, even though I love the library, but I am familiar with all of these titles, and most of them I would identify as classic American literature. I'm pretty sure all of these I read in high school. What's that?
Yeah, exactly that. I mean, I was going to say, must have changed a lot, because when we were in school, these were all books we were had to read for school.
Exactly. And they are often prescribed to be read for school because of, their strong literary merit. But and I think, well, this must have been, 60 years ago, but no, these books are still being challenged in the classroom because they continue to be recommended and continue to offend somebody. So, so let's look back at our good book qualities. What are some of your qualities that you find in a good book that you wrote down?
Makes you see the world from a different perspective.
Okay, awesome. So kind of back with our intellectual freedoms there, seeing the world through a different window. Anybody else?
Yeah. On the same line, just a book that really makes you think and feel deeply and be engaged.
Exactly. Books that teach values that we can connect with.
Right.
Anybody else want to share that someone else hasn't shared already?
Well, I mean, books give you education, make you a better contributor to society.
Okay, all right. And I think we could all agree that, if not all, most of these books on this frequently banned list have taught us all some of those lessons, to view the world from someone else's eyes, to, truly respect human values. And those are the things that, are lost whenever someone's intellectual freedom is impeded on. And there might be parts in some of these books that one or all of us may or may not agree with, but the literary merit of the book as a whole supersedes one person or a group's point of view on what is offensive. Okay, so we talked about this a little bit. I want to just make sure we really understand the benefits that our students and our learners get from supporting their intellectual freedom and encouraging the students to pursue that intellectual freedom. So like what our participant said earlier, readers are able to view the world from someone else's point of view. That's a very strong benefit. Reading these books with free access fosters empathy, understanding, and acceptance of people from diverse backgrounds, which kind of links in with understanding someone else's point of view. And also, it's a great opportunity for diverse groups to see themselves represented in literature. And this is truly powerful for young readers who are trying to understand their place in the world still. It gives students the ability to practice critical thinking skills by viewing the multiple perspective and challenging content. So if we think about any of those books on that list, you know, there were some challenging topics in there, but that opened the discussion to talk about those topics. So those perspectives help with that. And the resources within a free-to-read library empower students with critical thinking skills and to pursue free inquiry independently. So whenever you have that information in front of you and you're a curious mind, you are going to be encouraged to go seek it out. Anyone have any questions about the benefits of intellectual freedom?
No questions.
Awesome. So I found this mind map. I really like mind maps. And I connected with it with intellectual freedom. And I think it helps illustrate an open mind and the benefits that can come from when our students are being supported to pursue their own intellectual freedom. So I'd like you to analyze this mind map. Usually how you analyze mind maps is you read one shape and then you read the mirrored shape to see the comparisons. And while y'all read over this and kind of get that information, I want to read you an excerpt from this mind map illustrator, Paul Foreman. He has some eloquent words that I think are relevant to this discussion. A closed mind knows or thinks it knows. An open mind welcomes new learning. Each one of us has access to the same words. Therefore, each one of us is capable of greatness. Closed mind sees one broken fingernail. Open mind sees 9 good ones. This is the same view, but a different vision. How can you develop an open mind? You have it already at times when you are willing to not know, when you can suspend judgment, if you can drop your sense of knowing to move from learning to unlearning to new learning. Drop how it is and imagine how it might be, and you can tap into your infinite open mind. Open mind is like an open door as opposed to a locked door. The difference between easy access and no access. So when the library is promoting intellectual freedom and they are promoting free access, we are trying to be promoters of more open minds. I liked that. Okay. For the last fun part. So we promote intellectual freedom, but challenges occur. So I want everybody here today to understand the district's policy regarding challenges that may occur. So the first step, the first step that any librarian has whenever they're being challenged for their intellectual freedom in the library is that the complainant and the librarian find a resolution before it gets elevated any. So the librarian's first line of defense in book challenges is going to be educating the complainant in actual intellectual freedom like we have done today, and get the complainant to realize that this multiple perspective might be beneficial to their reader. So it says right here, the complaint is first heard and addressed by librarian or teacher. So that's the first step. And if that matter is not resolved, then we have a form. The form is discussed on a board and reviewed by the principal, and the materials will remain in use until an ultimate decision has been made to keep or remove the book from use. Does anyone have any question about that challenging procedure if material reconsideration is needed?
Cool.
Okay, it's pretty straightforward. Okay, so we're on our last activity here. At the bottom of your second page of your handout, this is a cause and effect mind map, another mind map. So the center square has an event. And this event is a student is restricted from accessing materials freely. So we know from our presentation today that the student could be restricted in a number of ways. So I want you to get 1 or 2 ideas, synthesize the information you learned today, and write them in 1 or 2 sentences about what could cause a student to be restricted from accessing materials freely. And then over here in our effect bar, I would like you to write 2 things that could happen, and it could be on the student's personal level, or it could even be a widespread effect of that student being restricted from accessing those materials. And then we'll discuss a little bit on that when you're done. For example, I'll give you an example. If we have book banned over here, and that caused a student to be restricted from access, and that caused him to miss out on an awesome book. Okay, and that wasn't a very good example, so y'all try to put some more critical thinking into that than I did. But I'll give you all a couple minutes, and I'd love y'all to share and see what you've learned today. Did everyone have a chance to get a sentence or 2 down?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so if anyone wants to share, I'll read the mind map like this. A book is banned, which caused the student to be restricted from accessing materials freely, which caused blah, 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 blah. So like read it like 1 complete sentence. Would anyone like to share one of their cause and effect sentences that they have?
Sure, I'll get one.
Thank you.
So I guess in this example, a district would only allow official sex education to be abstinent only,
Okay.
therefore cutting off, resources and materials for other types of sex ed.
Okay.
So that could lead to, a widespread effect for that district, I guess. Maybe it would lead to higher rates of teen pregnancy and things like that.
Okay, I see what you're saying. With the student being restricted from that information that could have an effect. Thank you. That's a good example. Any more sharers?
Well, I was thinking about my student that lives in poverty and can't pay his fines and loses his books and all that. And so what happens is the Matthew effect. He reads less, so his reading level does not improve, and it's just I just hate that. So anyway, and then if books are banned, then students don't learn how to think for themselves about to form their own values. Well, yes, this is what I think, or no, I don't agree with that.
Exactly. Thank you. Does anyone else have something they'd like to share? Okay, let's move on. I apologize with the technical difficulties today. There we go. Okay, so if we don't have any, does anyone have any questions regarding intellectual freedom or our district policies that you need clarified? Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to turn back to our first page of the handout where we had our pre-assessment on our 3 learning objectives. And I'd like you to take a second and reassess your understanding on those 3 objectives. And you can just keep that on your handout. You don't need to share it with the group. But if you could get that to me in some way after this, I'd really appreciate that information for my own learning. So if no one has any other questions, I want to thank y'all for tuning in today and helping me out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, bye-bye, everyone. I'm going to turn off the recording.
Bye.
Bye.